What's going on, guys? It's Mohammed, the host of Aware Alpha, and welcome to episode 99 or 100. We don't know exactly which one this will be. Just want to say I'm super grateful for all you listeners. I'm grateful to be able to have this platform, just continue sharing things that I'm going through, experiences that I'm dealing with, and at the same time, bring in unique guests onto the show that I learn from, and based on the feedback that I get through our emails and the DMs and the messages, you guys are also getting value from these conversations. So I'm absolutely grateful for that. And I know that you guys are probably like, what is wrong with his voice? I've been traveling last 2 days, so just a little under the weather. But that's the beauty of having guests on the show, because they do 80% of the talking and I do 20%. So we will be good. Today's guest is another special guest that I have found through just researching on Instagram and the people that I feel called to. You guys know how I find these guests that I bring onto the show. I feel called to reach out to them, and we have a conversation. So Nick is our guest today. He's actually in Berlin, Germany. What he does, he facilitates a lot of events for men, retreats, and I'm excited to have a conversation with them because a lot of things that he shares on his page resonated with me, and I'm excited to have him on the show. So Nick, welcome to the Aware Alpha podcast.
Thank you, Mohammed. Thank you for having me.
No problem, brother. The first question that comes off the top of my head is, what do you believe, or what do you think is healthy masculinity in this day and age?
I think healthy masculinity is based or founded on a few defined traits. Growing up, what made you a man kind of was skewed, and for each person it would be different. For some people it was how much money you made, or how many women you slept with, or how many cars you had, and the size of your muscles, and none of that shit has anything to do with healthy masculinity. And it's for me, it kind of stems from 5 pillars, of which then all these other traits can branch out. So presence, integrity, being grounded, having emotional intelligence, and then integrity. I say clarity is another one. Awareness is the other one of the 5. Each one of these, when somebody focuses and really begins to cultivate one of these traits within their own way of being, it then allows them it makes them a better man, and it makes them more magnetic, and it makes them better at what they do. It makes them better partners, better bosses, better everything. So it's not so much healthy masculinity for me is not so much what you can do on the external, but what you cultivate internally.
I like that answer. How could one embody or become more present? The first thing that comes to my mind is, I'm like, oh, I guess if I meditate more, I'll be more present. But I am curious to hear your thoughts on how could one start to embody that, to be more present? Of course, even a woman can do that too, but we're talking about a man here. So it's how can one start embodying presence more in their life?
For sure. It comes down to practice, and meditation. Mindfulness is something that needs to be cultivated daily. There is a difference between being present and embodying presence, which is kind of what you're speaking to. And I can sit here and I can be present with you, and I can listen to what you're saying, and I can kind of be super with every word you're saying, and I'm not thinking about what I'm going to say next, and I'm just here in the moment, present. And then I can just be the embodiment of presence, where this is something that it is how I transmit to the world. So I walk down the street and I am the embodiment of presence, and I'm not looking at my phone. I'm not kind of lost in thoughts, but I'm just aware, mindful in every moment. It starts with a practice, starts with a daily practice to cultivate that ability to be mindful in every moment. Because as men, we're just often stuck in our heads wanting to get from point A to point B. And the continually coming back in this moment. Most people go to the toilet these days, they take their phone. Why? Because you can't just sit for 2 minutes, just sit without your phone and just practice presence, practice mindfulness.
Mm.
There's all these little things. We distract ourselves during the day rather than just say, okay, well, for the next few minutes, I'm going to take this moment without distraction and just allow myself to be and to feel the air on my skin, to feel the seat underneath my ass, to feel or to hear the birds off in the distance, and to just really start to fine tune our ability or our capacity to be present in each moment.
No, I love that. And I know we mentioned meditation and mindfulness here. Any other practical things that someone could do to start being more present and embodying presence in their life?
Yeah, well, I mean, other than the obvious practical thing of sitting down every morning or every night and meditating, there are certain stuck emotions that can get us caught in habitual thought patterns. And doing the work to release these emotions from the body is one way that will get us out of the monkey mind. So you do some kind of shadow work practice or an inner child work or whatever it is, and you release this noise and these blockages from the body and allow the mind to then start to settle. The deeper you go, the easier it is for sure to become more present in every moment.
The thought that came to my mind when you said that was, if you want to be more present or embody presence, you got to heal your childhood trauma. You know, that's what I thought. Because for me, as I've worked on healing my childhood traumas, that's how I discovered shadow work and inner child work and all that stuff. Yeah, I've just become more present in my day-to-day life and for the woman in my life. So that's what I thought of when you mentioned that. So for you work with men. Tell me a little about exactly what you guys do. And I'm curious to hear about your retreats and just share some stuff about Nick.
So my journey began as a nice guy. I was married. Due to my inability to be grounded, to be present, to have emotional awareness, to be able to have deep and challenging conversations with my partner, the emotional intimacy dissolved. When the emotional intimacy dissolves, the physical intimacy dissolves. I was addicted to porn. I had all of these issues going on. I was taking a lot of drugs, drinking a lot, partying a lot, disconnected from my purpose. Whole lot of issues that allowed me to hit rock bottom, basically. And it was from rock bottom that I was like, okay, so I'm going to go on this journey, and my main mission is to heal. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know how that's going to happen. Over the course of 3.5 years, I spent a lot of time traveling. I was in the jungle for a lot. I was in different ashrams and dark retreats and silent retreats. And over those 3.5 years, I kind of worked out the most powerful methods of healing for me. And then I would come back to Berlin, to where I was living, and people would ask me, can you show me that? Can you teach me that? What did you learn here? And over time, it started to become, I started up a men's circle, and I started to kind of hear all these reflections, how many of these men were in the same position I was. So I started to offer guys the basics of what I had learned in my journey to heal. And that journey is a never-ending process, but some of us start in a very fucking dark place, and I was there. So these retreats that I run now incorporate everything that I've kind of been through, and that includes plant medicine and shadow work and breath work, and a lot of the stuff is that there's a lot of sexual trauma and a lot of sexual pain with men, a lot of shame around that. So that's a big part of what I do. So depending on the retreat, I run retreats in Peru, where there is plant medicine as well as the men's work. I run retreats around Europe, where it's predominantly just men's work. And then I run a couple where it's all of it in Europe as well. Depending on the day, depends on how intense we go. I have one coming up in a couple of weeks that is, it's a 2-day retreat that'll be tapping into the different archetypes and the embodiment of the archetypes. And the reality is that most men, they might have heard king, warrior, magician, lover, but they may never have had the chance to embody what that means. So we'll go into the shadow and we'll really tease out the shadow aspects of those archetypes, and then we'll learn to embody it. And one of there's this stigma around a lot of the men's work that happens these days. It's very much men, sitting in circle and talking about emotions and being vulnerable, and it's a very beautiful aspect of it, and it's very necessary. However, there needs to be the other side of it as well. There needs to be the warrior, the strength, the power, the cultivation of that part that is innate in all of us. And there's a really beautiful Jordan Peterson quote where he says, if you think strong men are dangerous, wait until you see what weak men are capable of. And he goes on to talk about weakness is not a virtue. So in my younger years, I did a lot of fighting. I trained in kickboxing and would go out street fighting, and there was this like macho, deeply wounded bravado side of me. And then I went the other side of the spectrum of like peace and love and hugs and not war and all of this kind of shit. But I was also absolutely incapable of standing up for my truth or for anybody else's truth. So there is no virtue in being weak. And that is one of the things that it's really hit home for me over the past few years of what has happened within society and how many men have just been walked over and are incapable of standing up for their truth. So I take both elements. I take, the vulnerable, the open-hearted side of it, and I take the warrior side of it. And then once you have this kind of horizontal plane of the human experience, then you can work on the vertical plane of the spiritual experience.
I love that. I love the way you explained that. And also just thank you for sharing exactly how you've, went through the things that you did and where you are today. You mentioned a dark retreat. I'm curious to hear, because I've heard about silent retreats. I did a Vipassana once, like 3-4 years ago. But a dark retreat, tell me a little about that.
Yeah, that was the very first thing I ever did. I had started traveling and my plan was to go straight into plant medicine, and I met this guy and he starts talking about doing this dark retreat. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? And then somebody else starts talking about a dark retreat. I'm like, what is this? What are you talking about? And it's like, oh, you literally sit in a dark room and you don't do anything. I'm like, why the fuck would you do that? And then I ended up meeting this guy who became a very, very dear brother and a mentor. And I was telling him my plan, and he's like, no, dude, don't forget that. Wait until you get to the jungle before you do plant medicine. Go to a dark retreat. So literally it was like the fourth person in a week where I'd never heard of it until suddenly everybody's talking about it.
Yeah.
And you literally sit in the dark for a certain amount of days, and there is zero light, so you can't see your hand in front of your face. You got to learn to do everything in the dark. So somebody will deliver you food through a hole in the wall that is completely sealed off. So you got to learn to eat in the dark. You got to learn to shit in the dark. You do everything, and it's by far the most confronting thing I've ever done. Because there's no distraction. It's you and your thoughts.
Yeah.
And you get to the deepest, darkest, man, like, I just remember sitting there just thinking, like, where the fuck is that thought coming from?
Yeah.
Like, that is so dark, that thought. That is so painful. And this shit just kept on coming up. And it was like the deepest parts of my psyche were just suddenly being revealed because I couldn't escape. I couldn't distract myself. So after about 5 days, there was your brain starts to release DMT. So then suddenly it went from this really hellish place, and then suddenly it was a little bit lighter with the visions that would come. And then I ended up staying there for about 11 days, and it was transformational for sure.
That's amazing. And like you went through a lot of struggles. You were married and the whole nice guy, you said you were addicted to pornography, all these things, right? The bottom, and you hit the bottom, right? So what did it look like those first couple of weeks or couple of months where, like you said, you started to travel but like, and in the dark retreat, like what I'm curious about is like, because it's a lot of people hit rock bottom, or a lot of people are in the state of just drugs, porn, everything, but it's like they can't make the change. Maybe you can even tell them like, hey man, if you just stop doing that and you start doing this, like it will work. But it's like a lot of people never make that switch, right? So what would you say was the deep motivation or the inspiration that influenced you to be like, you know what, like I gotta heal, like I gotta go and just I gotta get, like, what was it that influenced you and inspired you to actually start the process?
So in that period of time, basically men need to hit rock bottom. And if they're not, if they have, you'll know if you hit rock bottom, because at some point you just fucking can't get any lower.
Yeah.
And a lot of these guys that you're talking about, they're not quite there. They may be at the fucking depths of despair, but they're still not at rock bottom.
No.
And in the process, my wife had an affair. And that was the thing that really snapped for me, because I realized that my entire life, all of my happiness eggs were in her basket. And then one day she's just fucking taken the basket. And I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
And I woke up from a nightmare and I was sweating and I was crying. And I was like, I was in this deep fucking hole of darkness. And I called my sister, who's a psychologist. And I was like, I'm fucked. I'm depressed. I don't know what to do. And she's like, go and help someone. I was like, no, I cannot. I can't even help myself. And she's like, find someone and go and help them. And I looked up Craigslist, and this woman was asking for a volunteer to help with her autistic child. And I went and spent a few hours a week with this woman and her kid who needed 24-hour care. And she had no help. The husband had left her, and she was in a fucking mess. And I was like, wow, man, my life is actually not that bad.
Yeah.
And I really started to see it's all perspective. Like, yeah, my shit for me at the time was it was the worst. And then I took a little step back and I was like, wow, actually, it ain't that bad. Like I've got the resources to do whatever the fuck I want from now on. And actually, I'm okay. So what do I want to do? Instead of like, now have the chance to do whatever the fuck I want to do.
Yeah.
What does that look like? I've always wanted to travel. All right, man. So go traveling. And then people are like, well, what are you going to do when you travel? It's like, I don't know. But I'm going to travel for 6 months and I'm going to spend every single day doing 3 things that I love. And that at the time was meditation, yoga, and drawing. And I started to do every day 3 things that I love. And it starts to affect the frequency of which you vibrate in this sphere, in this realm. And the self-love that you start to cultivate changes how you show up in the world. And then it changes what you receive back in the world.
Yeah.
And then the synchronicity started to happen, and then things started to change. And then suddenly 6 months later, my life was vastly fucking different.
That's so cool. Like the fact that, a lot of times we feel like, man, life sucks, right? And then I always share, like, even in my worst days, there's kids starving in Africa. There's people dying that have no like shelter, no, like, just there's always so much worse things that are going on. And then when and for you, you literally went to experience that, and then seeing that person, the mom and the autistic child every day was just giving you perspective, like, oh man, my problems are not as like this woman's, like what she's working with, right?
I was sitting in my first silent retreat, and I was still very much in the victim mode of poor me, my wife had an affair, fuck, I've had it so hard.
Yeah.
And then this brother gets up and he's like, yeah, I was raised in Kashmir, and at the age of 10, my entire family was raped and murdered in front of me.
Huh.
And I'm just like, whoa, man, I really need to fucking, like, I need to heal my shit because it ain't that bad.
Yeah.
And this guy was like a fucking being of light. And I'm just there like moping about, oh, woe is me. And I'm like, man, perspective is a fucking beautiful thing.
Oh man. Wow, that just saying with that right now myself, I grew up in Afghanistan, and my listeners know some of the stories, but the things that I experienced as a child, you only see in war movies. So just that person's story just now when you share that really touched me, because that's, yeah, like that's a very that's just those are things that happens.
Mm.
So wow, yeah, that's crazy. And I just want to say, of course, for you as well, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you for doing the work, and then also choosing to share it now, choosing to be in the space of helping other men and women, and for them to find the light in themselves, and for them to be inspired, and for them to do their own work, and to just see that we all have this power and the ability to fix what we feels broken, or what we just need to do to just be more peaceful, more free, all that stuff, right? um a question I have is, you mentioned in one of your posts that a woman's no is a sacred gift. um
Mm.
I'm curious to hear what you mean by that. Like, what is it? Like, yeah, I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on that. Why a woman's no, and that no could be anything, I guess. No, I don't want to date you. No, I don't think you're sexy. Or no, I don't want to be in your life. I'm assuming it's just any no from, right?
It's a beautiful question. I love that you brought it up because it is. I do a lot of work with a guy called John Wineland, and he's been a teacher of mine for the last couple of years. And he's the protege of a guy called David Data, who wrote Where the Superior Man.
Oh yeah, great book.
So, I mean, it's the Bible for men.
Yeah.
And John is an exceptional teacher and
Mm,
coach and mentor. So we're in this work, and he has these men's groups, he has these women's groups, and then the teacher training is men and women together. And you're with practiced people. You're with people who have been doing this work for a while, and like their level of being able to sit and kind of do this work is really, it's better, it's more advanced than most people in the world.
yeah.
And in this space, women were afraid to say no,
Mm,
despite it being completely safe, but despite the men being fucking solid, grounded, really powerful, beautiful individuals. Some of these women were afraid to say no. And it got me to, and they were afraid to say no of a man energetically getting closer to them. So nothing to do with, there's no touching, but energetically getting closer. If a woman's boundaries were crossed, the woman's would not say no out of fear of disconnection or fear of violence.
mm,
And it got me thinking to the society that we live in, where a woman would rather have her boundaries crossed than say no because she is afraid of what the man is going to do.
mm,
And, I remember years ago, I did the same thing when my girlfriend said no to giving me a blowjob.
mm,
And I rolled over. I was like, well, fuck, if I'm not going to get a blowjob. And I completely disconnected from the moment.
mm,
And she's looked at me, she's like, are you fucking serious?
mm.
Like I give you a no, and the little boy inside of you rolls over like a rejected little fucking shadow.
Yeah.
And at the moment, I was like, wow, that's how powerful is that? That was such a blind spot.
Yeah.
So her no is a sacred gift because it's like, where can you, or how can you rise up in this moment And first, acknowledge her no as something beautiful, because the
Mm-hmm.
fact that she has the courage to say no, it's like, fucking thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for having that courage to say no.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so where is it? Is it energetically, I'm not really showing up how I need to be? Because a no could be not in this moment. It
Mm-hmm.
could be, no, no, not just yet. Or it could be, dude, no, get the fuck away from me.
Mm-hmm.
Like there are many different variations of no. And it's like, okay, so how can I tune in to where she's at?
Mm-hmm.
So rather than getting stuck in my head, oh, she fucking said no to me, poor me. It's like, no, no, dude, just tune in, drop in.
Mm-hmm.
Can you feel her heart in this moment? Like if you breathe deeply, breathe in your balls, ground, perhaps you're not grounded enough.
Mm-hmm.
So women become our oracles when we're ready to listen. They will invite us to be the best versions of ourselves. They will like draw it out of us if we are able to listen.
Yeah.
So a woman says no, and it's like, you have two options. You can fucking cry about it, like, or you can just breathe, and it's like, all right. So perhaps I wasn't grounded enough. All right, so I'll breathe more deeply,
Mm-hmm.
and then you just ground in the space, and then you feel her heart. And the moment she feels you feeling her heart,
Mm.
she will soften. But if she feels you up in your head trying to work shit out, you're ungrounded, you're untrustworthy, you're unsafe. So there are ways that you can use her no to sharpen yourself. And
Mm.
this is why it's a gift.
Yes. I love that. And the thing that I think about is when you were saying that, man, we just, when you're with a woman and she's beautiful and everything, we love the highs that are good, right? Like when she's super horny, super flirty, super complimentary, all that stuff. We're fond of that. But the moment, because the other emotions come in storms, jealousy, all those other emotions, boom, that's how you can truly see how grounded a man is, because those ones, most men are like, they get thrown off, right? So when I thought of you saying, when she says no, it shows how grounded you are in your masculine, right? It's like, no, that's okay. Are you able to still love her even in the midst of that no? Are you able to
Can you
still,
stay open
yeah,
in the midst of her no?
yeah,
And it's a beautiful thing, man. Like, because when the feminine storm rages, if you can only have her when she's this tiny little perfect happy little fucking thing,
mm-hmm.
you've got so much work to do on yourself.
Yeah,
And one of the issues, men aren't taught as boys to be able to hold their own emotions.
yeah,
Stop crying, man up, don't be a pussy, all of these things. It's like, oh fuck, I can't show my emotions. So then suddenly you get this dude who can't show his emotions or can't hold his emotions. You put him in front of a woman who's her fucking beautiful feminine self.
yeah,
He doesn't know how to hold her
no,
because he can't fucking hold himself.
yeah,
So this is the work. What is so important, this is what I do with men, is like learn how to fucking hold your own emotions.
yeah,
Because once you can do that, then you can sit in front of a woman.
mm-hmm.
Another dear friend of mine and an amazing teacher, Sophie Josefina, she has this saying, you don't go to the ocean and hope for no waves.
Mm-hmm.
And this is exactly what, men go down to the ocean, I want fucking big waves. It's like, well, if you want the big waves, you have to have all of them.
Yeah,
You can't just have the super fucking sexy girl and the one that cooks like amazing food and the one that will dance for you and the one that, it's like, you have to, if you're going to have that, then you have to have the one that is going to fucking rage when she
yeah,
needs to.
mm-hmm.
And you need to be able to hold it.
Yeah, so true.
It's a sign of your emotional capacity and your maturity and your ability to be a fucking grounded, integrated man.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And I think it's beautiful. Myself, especially, there's no money in the world that could, like, would make me feel as good. And I use money as a measurement because that's something that everybody like tries for, right? But for me, these last couple of years, I'm like, doesn't matter all the money in the world. The fact that, I have integrity within myself, I love myself, I respect myself, I have healed, and I'm, healing is lifelong journey, right? So it's not like it's done, but it's like just the work that I've done is literally 3-4 years, and the freedom that I feel within myself, and of course my capacity to be able to hold space for amazing women in my life. There's nothing like money can't buy that, like money can't buy the whole year and a half of me crying every day and releasing suppressed emotions and sitting with myself in which, right, the retreats and all that stuff, right? Like no money in the world could buy that, it's like nothing. So no, I love the way you share that. So I have a question. Do you believe that it's okay to express your emotions as a man with your partner, and to what extent? Because I have heard some men. I actually made a post with a on my podcast that I did with another musician a couple of months ago, and I guess I'll share his answer here. But he says that no, it's okay to share your emotions with your woman to a little extent, but you can't be emotional with her. You need to express your emotions with your brothers and a support group that's there for you, and that's where you should be expressing most of your emotions. So I'm curious to your answer. Do you think it's okay to express your emotions to your intimate partner, and to what extent?
No, I agree with what he says, because a lot of men. So you have one side of the spectrum. If you have healthy masculinity in the middle, one side of the spectrum you have the nice guy. The other side of the spectrum you have toxic masculinity, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
And these nice guys, like the more overly emotional guys, will come to their partner and it's like, yeah, I can access my emotions, and they'll fucking dump it on their partner.
Yeah.
And they'll dump all of their shit on their partner. And because they're on this side of the spectrum, they don't trust the masculine externally, so they don't have so many male friends.
Yeah.
So most of their friends are women, and they don't have a place to take their emotional baggage. So they'll come home to their partner and they'll become the emotional ones. And this is the problem, because she's not your therapist, and she doesn't fucking need to be the masculine in this instance.
Yeah.
So the masculine, if you look at it like the structure, the masculine is the riverbed, the feminine is the water, the feminine is the beautiful energy that it will take whatever form you give it the capacity to take. And when you're the emotional wreck, to her, she needs to then become the masculine pole.
Yeah.
She needs to become the structure to hold it.
Yeah.
So that's what I agree with. Like, that's the shit that you take to your men's circle. That's the shit that you take to your brothers. So then you can come back and you can actually, perhaps you're in a relationship where you are the feminine pole and she's the masculine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also okay, if it doesn't come from a place of shadow. And there's a lot of relationships, the majority of relationships where that is the case, it comes from she doesn't trust men. He's a nice guy. So she'll go for a more feminine man that she can control. So therefore she's in control and she feels safe.
Yeah.
And he'll go for somebody that will mother him because he doesn't have the capacity to fucking do what is needed to be done.
Yes.
So these two wounds attract each other, and then suddenly they're in relationship, and the resentment builds because the intimacy fades because there's no polarity.
Yes. That's great.
So I agree what the other guy said.
I like that. And it's something that I learned in a way the hard way, but I was in a relationship with an amazing woman in 2020, and I was early on in my work. She was the one that really actually introduced me to a lot of parts of myself that I wasn't aware of yet. But yeah, like I was emotionally just dumping on her, and then she had to go become the masculine, right? The riverbed, like you said. But I learned that in a way through experience, and hearing, men like yourself and like the other brother that I had on the podcast sharing those things really helped me. It's like, wow, like that's so true. And in the last year or so, like
Just a caveat, when I say that, I don't mean that you're not allowed to cry in front of your partner.
Yeah.
Like, if she feels you're holding on to something,
Yeah.
and you can't tell her what that is, she'll lose trust in you. And this is one of the things about men, is that we think we're super fucking smart by hiding things.
Yeah.
And women can feel 10,000 times more than we can.
Yeah.
So we come in and it's like, oh, fuck, I got this thing going on and I can't tell her. And she's
Yeah.
like, what's up? And you're like, nothing. And she's like, bullshit.
Yeah.
Because she can feel it.
Yeah.
So what you can say in that moment is like, look, baby, I got this fucking heavy thing going on from work, but I don't want to burden you with it. I'm going to take it to my men.
Yeah.
And then once I've offloaded all of the shit to them,
Mm.
then I can come back to you. And,
Mm.
maybe you come back and maybe it's so heavy that at some point you cry. And
Yeah.
that's fucking beautiful. And it's okay because she can feel you.
Yeah.
She wants to feel your heart.
Mm.
That's it's the key to all of it. She wants to feel your heart in each moment. And we just get stuck on our heads trying to work shit out.
Mm.
So as long as she can feel your heart, and then that is the difference of yes, crying or yes, overloading and dumping your shit. That's nuanced but different.
Mm. Do you think there's such a thing as healthy codependency in a relationship?
I think to a certain extent, we all become a little codependent.
Over time, especially?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, yeah, healthy, unhealthy. I don't think there's anything wrong with it at some point. You see these couples that are fucking 75 and they just like they're codependent. They've been together for so long.
Yeah.
Like my parents, they're codependent. They'd be fucked without each other.
Yeah.
At some point, it's gonna happen. Like one
Yeah.
of them's gonna die. And in a lot of cases, I've been in relationships where the codependency was just it was too much. It was unhealthy.
Mm.
And I think if you can get to a space in the beginning where you can fulfill most of your needs,
Mm.
and then she can fulfill most of her needs, and then you come together as one unit, and then of course you're going to have needs that come up and arise within a relationship. And as long as you can both express what those needs are, and you both have outlets, I think regardless, there are going to be over time there's going to be some form of codependency, and I don't see anything wrong with it.
Okay. No, makes sense. That was a great answer. Tell me about the plants. So you have done ayahuasca, I'm assuming, if you were into Peru. Tell me about some of the plants that you have worked with, and then I have a couple questions about that as well.
Yeah, ayahuasca was something that I, I don't know now. It's like 12, 15 years ago. I heard about it for the first time, and
Okay.
it was something that always intrigued me.
Mm.
And I was just like, no, 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 not yet, not
Yeah.
yet, not yet, not yet. And I was living in New York, and people were like, oh, hey, there's a ceremony in this apartment. It's like, no, no, not yet, not yet. I'll wait to the jungle. I'll wait to the jungle. So then, yeah, I think now 6 or 7 years ago, I went to the jungle for the first time and tried it, and it cracked open something which was unable to be cracked open.
Mm.
And I released years and years of pent up trauma. And it became a very big part of my life for quite a number of years. I'd spent a lot of time in the jungle dieting, and you drink very regularly.
Mm.
And then it got to a point where it's like, I'm done. I don't want to drink anymore. And now maybe 3 or 4 times a year, I'll go on retreat. And it's just, there comes a point where it's like you feel the call for it. And it's like, like I'm ready. I need to go back and drink. And then there'll come a time where it's like, no, I'm done. I need to integrate. I need to really, integration is it's as important as the medicine itself.
Yes.
And sometimes integration is for a few weeks, and sometimes it's a few years.
Yeah.
But that's one of the big issues. I see the value in going somewhere and really going head first into it and doing a lot of it over a small period of time. But there are people that do it consistently every week for months and months and months, and there's no real integration period. And for me, then it's missing something.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've integrated ayahuasca into some of the men's retreats that I do
Mm-hmm.
because it's like doing 6 years of therapy in 6 hours,
Mm-hmm.
and it gets to the root cause of some of the deeper problems that we're not willing to look at.
Mm-hmm.
So suddenly you're in ceremony and this thing comes up which you've never thought about, it you haven't seen, you have no idea what it is, and then you have to face it and you can't escape it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next day we'll go through integration, we'll talk about it, and then we'll do shadow work at some point over the course of the retreat, and then you really get to heal these deeper aspects of yourself. So for me, it's an incredibly profound medicine and tool that we use. Kambo is the other one. Kambo is the frog medicine.
Okay.
It's a purgative. It's basically the secretion that comes from the back of a tree frog from the jungle,
Okay.
and you burn small little points in your skin, and then you put the medicine in your skin, and it's 30 to 40 minutes of basically feeling like you're dying, and you can throw up, you can shit, you can sweat, you can shake, you can cry, you can do everything at once. It's a powerful medicine that works on the physical, mental, emotional, and energetic bodies. So you can feel basically reborn once you've done it.
What would you say is the difference between Kambo and ayahuasca from your experiences?
Ayahuasca is psychedelic that has DMT in it. So you can have visions. I've spoken to guys that had visions, they were drinking with their dead relatives in heaven, and guys that have seen the history and the future of the planet by 1500 years, and really vivid, really deep visions. And Kambo is not psychedelic, it's psychotropic. So it goes through the blood-brain barrier and it causes the body to react in ways which basically cleanse the body of everything that shouldn't be there. So it's very much a purgative, whereas ayahuasca, you can spend 6 hours with ayahuasca and it can feel like 6 hours of Kambo, or you can literally go to heaven and drink with your dead relatives and have the most magical 6 hours of your life.
Wow, that's a good answer. You said with ayahuasca, it's like 6 years of therapy in 6 hours. And is it because you said it's because it goes to the root of whatever it is that you're hiding from, scared to deal with, and it just brings it up, right? The thought that comes to my mind is like from your experience. So now you did that 6 hours, you went through that. Probably now it's the next 6 months or the next 2 years or whatever, where now you processing all that stuff, probably that has brought more clarity and understanding for you, right? So it's like everybody can just go do a ayahuasca ceremony, but like you were saying, what matters is like now when you leave, how do you process all the stuff for the next 6 months? Do you actually deal with it? Do you actually like reflect on it, or do you kind of just shut it down and just go back to your normal life, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and that's one of the big problems is that people might go off and do a ceremony in the city somewhere, or because you can basically do it everywhere now, and they'll go do that, and then come Monday they'll go back to their 9 to 5 job that they fucking hate and their relationship that they hate, and it's like, so what? Like, what's the point?
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough when I started doing it that I had one thing after the other, like 10 days of deep diving, hardcore breath work every day, followed by silent retreats, followed by time in the jungle alone. Like all of this was this process of me like being able to just sit there and reflect on what I'm doing and what was happening in my life. And that's why the integration is so important. It's like you don't just do these things and then go back to the life that you hated with no plan after.
Yeah. That's definitely something that I'm looking forward to myself in these next couple of years to experience that for sure. I can tell Mama Ayahuasca is calling me. Let's talk about porn. I have a program on it. I talk a lot about it. How destructive do you think watching pornography is?
On a scale of 1 to 10, or what?
Let's go. I guess I'll give a scale. On a scale of 1 to 10. Yeah. 10 being like it's fucking destructive, and 1 being like, you know what? It's not a big deal.
I mean, it depends on the person, but for many men, it's 10. Like it is. Men don't like. People just don't fucking realize because it is so easy to access. It is how damaging it is doing. Like you see the brain scans of somebody on porn and somebody on heroin, and it's the fucking porn is worse.
Yeah.
It's like it destroys your capacity to be intimate with others.
Yeah.
It's like they did there were studies that were done before 2006 where men under the age of 40, between 2 to 3% of men under the age of 40 had erectile dysfunction.
Huh.
2007, all the free porn sites, Pornhub and all this shit, all of that came out 2007. Since 2007, men under the age of 40 that have erectile dysfunction is at 37%.
Wow. Huh.
And men are just like, yeah, what do you mean? I'm just going to jerk off. And it's like, the reason porn is free is because it fucking destroys men.
Yeah.
Energetically, it destroys them. It destroys the capacity the desire to do anything. It's just it's more addictive than crack. Like it's and that's just the shit that it does to men. And then you look at especially the free shit, the human trafficking and the sex trafficking of children that is tied to the porn industry. It's the biggest industry in the world, far more than drugs is human trafficking. And because of porn, that most of it is tied to porn. And guys are like, oh yeah, but I don't watch that stuff. And it's like, yeah, but you fucking support it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you support the channels that show it, and this is why. So yeah, man, I mean, I watched it a lot when I was younger. And I'd wake up in the morning, I'd watch it. Maybe during the day, I'd watch it. Before bed, I'd watch it. And I thought it was fine. And then I got into Tantra and these other things and realized how much I was destroying my fucking life.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I had a client. He watches 20 to 30 hours a week.
Holy shit!
Like, how destructive is it for him? Like, it's fucking 100.
The fact that like the brain scans and like when you hear those things, like it's worse than crack. It's literally worse than heroin. It's like that hits me right there. It's like why would somebody even want to deal with it, like even watch it, if when you realize like it's that destructive? Of course over time it gets more destructive, right? It's like that thought just it blows my mind. I'm like, wow, how could somebody watch it, right? And for me, I'm very like, go ahead, say what you were gonna say.
It comes to a lack of meaning and a lack of purpose. And I'm just about to post something on meaningful purpose or meaningful responsibility versus low-level pleasure. If you don't have something that is meaningful in your life, you'll revert to low-level pleasure. So video games, porn, all of this shit, because you're like, oh, fucking. And there's this scourge throughout society of these young men who cannot fucking go beyond the cheap dopamine hit. Because they have nothing in their life that is just really fucking calling them forward. Like if you don't get out of bed and be like, fuck yeah, I get to do this thing today. You're going to go for something that gives you this cheap, low-class pleasure. So, purpose is one of the major fucking things that men need in their life. And for me, once I found my purpose, fucking everything shifted. And then you look at a guy who's on purpose and it's like, fuck yeah, I want what he's got. And then you look
Yeah.
at a guy that has no purpose, and you're like, oof, poor bastard.
Yeah.
Like it's a night and day shift.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's another thing is the lack of healthy masculine in men's life, right? It's like which, if you grow up, first of all, your first original healthy masculine in your life is your father. So if your father wasn't healthy masculine that was teaching you, embodying all these good habits and values into you, then you're kind of already on the wrong track. And then society, culture, environment is trying to get a piece of you, that advertisement, everything. So it's like you already start to get, so it's like it's like good luck out there, because it's not an easy world, and hopefully you make it. And I'm very I'm 32 years old. I started at 24, 25 is when I stopped watching porn just because I just realized, literally, I've always just been an ambitious kid. And I just realized I was like watching it, once or twice a day. And all of a sudden I realized I just hit me one day. Well, I read the book, Think and Grow Rich. Chapter 13 talks about mysteries of sexual transmutation. And it just got me curious. And then I started to research. I'm like, holy shit, like every time I ejaculate, like it's life force. I'm losing these minerals from my body. So that's the stuff that got me curious, right? And I was like, shit. So I stopped. I was like, I'm just gonna go like 3 weeks without it, 4 weeks without it. And I would just start to feel magnetic, like I felt more like I could like start conversations with women. I'm like, what is happening? Right. Like it was just like the beginning of, for me, like where I'm like, something is here, right? And in the next 4 or 5 years, like I stopped, I changed my life, started different businesses, and now like my inner circle, I used to just be hanging out with my friends, like guy friends. I'm like, yo, did you jerk off today? Don't jerk off, man. That shit. Like, so I just like, and then slowly, like 2 years ago, one of my friends, like, dude, he's like, you need to have a program on this because like you have all the tools, strategies, everything. Like you, so and that's how I made the program. But for me, it was always like the physical stuff where that got me even first, because I was like, damn, like I just went 3 weeks. After the first 90 days, I started my first business. Like like just things started to change for me. So I was like, damn, I guess it's this thing on the screen. I gotta stop watching that, right? And then now it's been different. One of the last topics I do want to discuss here is we mentioned shadow work a bunch of times here on this episode. First of all, tell us here, tell the audience. I've done a lot of it, and most of the audience is aware of. But I'm curious to hear from your perspective. What is shadow work, first of all?
So it's the parts of ourselves that we don't want others to know about. It's the
Mm,
shame, it's the guilt, it's the feelings that are repressed. It's the piece of our psyche that lays hidden and we keep it from others.
mm. And now my next question would be is, how do you start the shadow work? What's the practical steps now to be like, somebody's listening to this and like, man, I have some insecurities. Damn, I don't tell this. Like, how do I start this process of shadow work?
There are a bunch of free things online that you can find, but the deepest stuff, you kind of need somebody to hold that space for you.
Mm,
Um, you can journal. What are the parts of myself that I hide from others? What are the masks that I wear?
mm.
Um, what's a part of me? When do I get triggered easily?
That's a good question.
Because I mean, every time you get triggered, it's just a reflection of an unhealed part of yourself. And
Mm,
there are tools that you can use, and everybody has kind of a different version. But there are tools that you can use where you really start to explore the darker parts of yourself, and it gets fucking uncomfortable because you've never looked at it, because that's why it's the shadow. You don't want
yeah,
to look at it. A lot of the times you don't even know it's there.
yeah.
And I like to refer. It's kind of like, you have an experience as a child, and you're embarrassed by it or you're shamed about it, and you put it under the staircase in the cupboard, and you turn the key and you lock it there, and you just forget about it, and you
Yeah,
carry on with your business and your life, and you pretend it's not there. But this thing, fucking, every now and then it'll start to knock on the door,
yeah,
and you're like, what? Hang on, why did I just behave like that? What the fuck? That was uncalled for, or that was unnecessary, or that was overwhelming.
yeah.
And then the longer you go, this thing just starts scratching at the door, and you start, it affects your behavior. It affects everything you do.
Yeah.
So shadow work is basically going down to that door and opening the door and shining the light on it, and realizing that it's actually just a part of you.
Yeah.
And once you begin to integrate that shadow back into yourself, this is when it starts to dissolve. And this is when it's just, the whole idea of integrating all of ourselves is, and this is, we spoke briefly about the nice guy, and the nice guy doesn't trust the masculine because of, doesn't, maybe his father or brothers or men in his life when he was growing up. If he doesn't trust the masculine externally, he doesn't trust it internally. So that's a giant fucking shadow for a nice guy.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't trust a part that is innately of himself. So exploring, perhaps for that guy, why don't I trust men? And then going kind of deeper into that, what did they do to me, and how did that make me feel? And what did my little fucking 6-year-old Nick do when these guys did this to me?
Yeah.
And what would my adult Nick say to my 6-year-old Nick? And you start to incorporate, and then can you tell that little 6-year-old version of yourself how much you love him and how much you appreciate that he was just trying to save you? So there are all these different ways, and ultimately the idea is that you integrate that shadow back into yourself.
Yes. Oh, I love that. That was a perfect answer. I hope anyone listening to the podcast, this inspires you guys to do your own shadow work and look at all those different parts of yourself that you've been pushing off to the side. Last question here. What comes to your mind, or what do you think when you hear the word aware alpha?
I love the term aware. For me, awareness is one of the big pieces of healthy masculinity. Because you get, a really powerful question, which not many men know how to answer, is what is the difference between a boy and a man? And for me, a boy believes the universe kind of revolves around him.
Yeah.
Whereas a man has the awareness that he is a minute part of something much greater.
Yes.
So then he has this awareness that everything he does echoes outwards, and his energy, his physical, what he does physically, what he says, all of it can affect his external space and others in that space. And that comes down to awareness. And it's a really fucking beautiful thing to see a man that has awareness.
Yes.
And alpha for me is just somebody who, it's kind of like the term aggression. The true meaning of aggression has been tainted.
Yeah.
Aggression is just tenacious. It means somebody that goes after something with tenacity.
Yeah.
So for me, alpha has been tainted, but the meaning of it is there's something beautiful, and in somebody who just leads with strength, confidence, and a deep knowing that they're there as a protection mechanism for the others.
Yes.
So the two together are quite beautiful.
I love that. Thank you so much. That was a great answer. It was my own in genuine creation. It just came one day. Yeah, no, this was a great podcast, brother. I loved it. I loved everything we talked about. I'm excited to share this with our audience. As we finish off the podcast here, please let everybody know where they can find you. I will make sure to enter all that stuff in the detail section of the podcast.
Yeah, you can catch me on Instagram, which is just at Nick Warner, NICWARNER, and then my website, nickwarner.com. But pretty much everything I do will come through Instagram for sure.
Perfect. Sounds good. Yeah, I'll definitely enter that. And lastly, I just want to say thank you so much. Everything that you shared. You're one of the most and rare men these days that are doing the work, that are actually also sharing it, right? I'm sure there's a lot of men doing the work, but not many are actually finding it as their purpose to share with the world. And you're doing that, which makes you, I believe, a modern day aware alpha. So thank you for doing that work, and thank you for blessing us with an hour of your time today.
Thank you, brother. Thank you for having me.
No problem. And as we finish off the podcast here, I just want to set some intentions. My intentions are for you guys to truly take this information and, learn something from it and start to implement a practice in your day-to-day life. My intentions are for you to realize that, we all have the power to heal ourselves. We all have the power to look deep within ourselves and fix what needs to be fixed, or just deal with what needs to be dealt with, and to become a more aware version of ourselves. And until next time, stay an aware alpha.